How's it going, YouTube? Coincidence today with another video, and today, guys, what the bring to you is going to be the next episode of the podcast, episode 7. I'm joined by
Roarkallos.
Evilise.
And Galzo.
Oh my god, we got the eggs going already. Well, welcome back, everyone. You know, we are a very dysfunctional family over here, and it's very great, you know. I love each and every one of you. This is a great time to really be and just have this chat open. It's always a great time to have this podcast running. So, anything new happened between the last one and now?
Well,
No,
besides the
nothing.
things that everybody know already.
No, nothing has happened. Nothing happened at any events. There were no foods that were offered to anyone. End of discussion. End of story.
If you haven't already checked out Cloud, definitely go ahead and do so. The Striker deck box I received is just fantastic. The quality is amazing. There's one thing that, you know, this is going to be the box that my Striker deck now forever lives in. So I hope that you guys enjoy this as well. Go ahead and pick yourself up one. Code GGYGO10 for 10% off. And let's hop right on into the first topic that we have for you today. That's going to be wishes for OTS foils. We just need Olenoids. It's the last one. It's all we need, and we're all good. But this will be always the one that I'm hoping we get. What about all of you?
So, for me, it's got to be Labyrinth Chandraglier. It is the only Labyrinth card that is not foil. They all are at this point, every single one of them. But Chandraglier is not.
Only the
Okay,
playable
good
ones.
ones, the playable ones. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I see you thinking the playable ones. Okay.
So, I think something that I was playing over this past weekend, we had like an underdog tournament at my OTS, and I was playing Melfi cards, and it occurred to me that so many of them are commons, and that's kind of funny with their theme. But for some of the ones that have been super relevant, like Melfi of the Forest, like let's give Melfi of the Forest an ulti of some sort. Let's give like Wally a super. I think it would just be fun because the whole deck, so much of the deck is common. It would be nice to give them a bit of shine.
Yeah. Doesn't Forest have Ultra in ROTD?
It's an ultra, but I really would just love like big upgrade, big like
Ooh.
ultimate for it. So.
That could be sick. My wishes would be Sprint, the Iron Dust Dragon. It's the only Albaz fusion that is not hollow. And they also had a chance to print it, but they didn't. It was a common in the original print, then in the structure. And also maybe a toot of the branded. I think that could, it also came out as a common, I think, in Syac. That could definitely be nice. But I wonder if I don't know if they want to print more branded stuff, because there's been like branded stuff in every set for the last 3 years.
Talking a bit more about the number one thing that I think is definitely been going around Twitter a lot, what I've seen, is talking about the idea of having lingering floodgates in the game. And these are usually ones that you can't really do much about, especially like Shifter. I know a lot of people are really upset with Droll. They're both kind of the big two right now. How do we feel about them? I know for sure everyone already knows how I feel about Shifter. It's just a card that promotes no interaction. If we had Gamma at 3 or like other cards that could counteract this, then sure. But there's really just no play around. And I know that we keep talking about these cards, but we got to keep talking about them until they're finally gone or dealt with. They're just kind of too toxic for the game at the moment.
Yeah. I'll start. I think you nailed it. When it comes to like Gamma, I think that is the big issue with. I mean, there's two things here. I think Shifter Droll are one thing. I think something like Dimensional Barrier is another thing. Just as an example, and we don't have a way to deal with any of them anymore because Gamma is a 1. I think that was like the beginning of Super Heavy Samurai format where they didn't want Super Heavy to just like go off because it was just like the beginning of like when Ass Dragon was released, so you can just make a Baron off of it. So they limited it. Yeah, Ass Dragon. And so they took that away. Now you don't really have a way to deal with Shifter and Droll. And they also took away Reboot, which is fine in some cases. I know the room. I don't know. I know what GGYGO and I feel about
Reboot to 3.
It could come back and it should come back, but there's just no. I mean, lingering floodgates would have been okay if we had some tools to deal with them, and we get more lingering floodgates and we get like more tools taken away from us. And I think that's mainly the problem. Obviously, everybody would want to see shifter banned. I think there's not like a lot of people who want it in the game, but at least give us some tools to deal with them.
Yeah, I think the hit to Gamma was such like a. It was one of those things where like with the release of Ass Dragon, it made Gamma just so powerful to resolve on your turn that it made sense for Gamma to be hit in that situation. But then it has just allowed Shifter to run free, and it is just a card that even in decks where it still hurts them, it's just become this floodgate where, oh, I run it because it hurts my deck, but just less than my opponent. And it still makes for kind of unfun games. YCS Richmond, I was playing it in Rescue Ace. And that was not terribly uncommon, even though it's a card that turns off like 6 of your starters. So it's a card that is just continuing to be an issue every time we do one of these videos and every format. So I think we're all kind of in agreement about what needs to happen to it.
So I said that I would try to play a bit of devil's advocate with this one, because naturally, like, I think if you ask 10 out of 10 players, how do you feel about lingering floodgates? Pretty much all of them are going to tell you we don't like them, right? Now the thing is, if you ask for some nuance, ask for some elaboration after the question, you'll find that some people are actually okay with some lingering floodgates, and they might even like some of them, and they're not okay with others. For example, most people probably don't really mind like Droll or Lancia. Some people really do mind Droll. A lot of people do really hate Shifter. A lot of people really hate Dimensional Barrier. But other people see these cards as like the cards that allow their deck to compete or provide them like a win condition, especially when some of these cards become searchable. And it's interesting because it's like, where do you draw the line? Now, obviously, I'm a tier player, so I like to think you draw the line at Shifter because it's 2 turns. But the fact of the matter is that we keep getting more lingering floodgates, as Galzo was pointing out earlier. And Konami doesn't seem to be that interested in putting a stop to these things. In fact, you might even make the case that they are promoting them, especially with some future some card releases that are on the horizon. So, what do we, I think I almost feel like we as players have to start accepting that these cards are a part of the game. Sometimes you will get drolled. Sometimes you will get shifted. Sometimes you will get Lancia'd when that comes back into the format. And sometimes you're going to get debarriered, and it'll produce a non-game. And it sucks. I don't really like to take this stance on it too much, but to a certain extent, it's like you can't really please everybody, because some people really like Droll and some people really don't.
I think the larger issue here, though, is the fact that with Gamma being gone right now, you don't even play into talents. Because if you drop a shifter right now, you're just like, oh, it's draw phase, I'm just throwing it now. But when Gamma was around, you had to wait until your opponent had something on the board unless you didn't care if they had the Gamma, which if you were the better player, a lot of times you're just like, we're going to wait a minute before we drop this. It's like using a Dweller versus waiting till there's a card on the board so you don't get imprimed, right? So now you can't even watch your opponent shifter in main phase and then get to rip a talent on your opponent. Like, it just doesn't happen. So you're just sitting there staring at your cards that don't do anything. So that's the other like larger issue with me in this situation.
So you're not wrong, but I would argue that Gamma has a lot of other problems that kind of like supersede its ability to beat a lingering floodgate. For example, like Dragon Link is a perfect example. Like, what are you going to do? Not Ash Chaos Space? That card is a +3. But you don't Ash it because you can't.
Right.
So if you play into Gamma, you lose on the spot. Gamma is actually a very oppressive hand trap. And I actually think that it deserves its place in the limited status, even if I do really miss it in terms of combating Shifter.
I don't disagree. There's a lot of situations with Gamma that promoted really awkward game states because you felt like you needed to do something that you also felt like you couldn't do. So it was just very awkward because now, like, the second that Gamma was gone, everyone was still playing around with situations until everyone's like, wait a second, it's not here anymore. And then they just started doing the play, and then randomly you get caught by a Gamma and you're like, what just happened? Like, that's always really funny. It happened to me against Lab too, and then just like ashed the Gamma, right? Because I needed it to go through, but I was like, that's insane. So although Gamma is very broken, I don't think that it's kind of like Papega, really, right? Like, nobody was surprised to see it gone, but everyone was just a little bit more sad to see it gone because they're just really crazy cards. But I still think that if you promote really crazy floodgates, that you need answers to them. And that doesn't mean they should be legal even if there are answers to them, but there should at least be an answer to it.
Lingering floodgates they could be fine if we have ways of dealing with them. Right now, if you're staring down a shifter or a droll and you have no tools in the arsenal, like there's nothing you can actually do. You can draw the one-off called by, maybe you play cross out. That's basically it. I mean, yeah, they're going to be releasing more of these in the future, obviously. But I think it just doesn't make sense to me, like as a design perspective. I see what they're trying to do. I understand that they want to give these powerful tools to players, but I should have an equal chance to draw the out to that as the player playing the Lingering Floodgate. I mean, I should have the same chance, I feel like. Or maybe slight less of a chance, but still some chance. Because right now I have 0. I'm not going to play the one Gamma. I mean, it's not realistic. And I think Gamma is also relatively fine, even though it's a very powerful card. You had the limitations of playing into it. You knew the rules of the game, right? You couldn't do some things, you could do other things. But it still makes you think and play a little bit differently. So if that is the cost to being able to deal with like drolls and shifters, then so be it.
I lose my mind every time I talk about Shifter, honestly. It's just like, Shifter is Shifter, you know? It's just such a crazy card. And we talk about banlist hits, and I know that Azolde, that was a huge one for the last, like, couple weeks. A lot of people were talking about Azolde, and it is just another card that's been popping up a lot. Shifter, another card that's definitely warranted on the ban list. I've talked to people about seeing SP go to 1. It's the same thing we're seeing in other situations, even in the past with Hulk, where it randomly went to 1, but it also just kind of made sense because your opponent always had like the follow-up Hulk. So I could see them doing something like that, but definitely interested to hear all of your ban list hits.
Well, for starters, I'd like to say thank you so much for calling it Isolde. I like it when people pronounce it that way. Second of all, yeah, I do think that I would like to live in a world where SP is at 1. I would not like to live in a world where SP is ever banned. I hope that card becomes a mainstay of Yu-Gi-Oh! For the foreseeable future. But I can definitely see a world where like limiting that card is worthwhile, because it's a little unfair when you can use SP as part of your like end board as a way to like play through hand traps, or just as like, you know, like just as sometimes even as an extender. Like sometimes banishing your own cards can like let you continue playing, because you can banish your own cards in the graveyard. And then after that, on turn 3, you go into like the second SP to then use it as a board breaker to break the paltry board that your opponent was able to establish after you went first. That doesn't really seem too fair to me, even though I do really, really, really love SP Little Knight. Aside from that, like that's not going to happen in probably anytime soon. The card's got to sell. Realistic like ban list hits. I think Isolde has had a target on its back for a very long time. And you know, Eva and I were actually talking about this the other day, that, you know, if we're talking about like how to hit all of the decks that are in the format, I'll talk about one of the hits, and then, you know, colleagues can talk about the other ones. But one that we really liked was like Tour Guide to 1, because it like limits the number of 1-card starters that Unchained has, while not really doing anything to like kill any of the newer cards or even kill the deck at all. Because like if you start doing other things like limiting Shavara or limiting Yama, limiting Shayama, it's like, oh well, Shayama's only played at 1, but like limiting Shavara or Yama, it's a little bit too much. Like I don't think the deck warrants that. But I will say I do actually think that like Rescue Ace does need to be addressed a little bit. It's not an oppressive best deck, but it is the best deck. and it'll continue to be so because it is getting more support from what I hear.
The thing is, I don't necessarily disagree, because if we are addressing like a wide variety of the format, if we're talking about hitting Isolde, which is part of, you know, the Mikanko deck, it's of course part of the Infernoble deck, and even part of some Rescue Ace variants, right? You're going to need to hit Unchained, and then you're probably going to need to hit Pearly. And so in that, if you don't address Rescue Ace, then it will just run rampant. So the hit that probably would be like, I would hate this, but I think a fair hit to that would be hitting Emergency in some way, hitting it to 1 or something. Because if you hit Emergency to 1, it doesn't impact the number of 1-card starters that you have. You still have all your Diabell stars, you still have all of your lifters. But you only get that 1 emergency, and you'll need to put it back with the field spell or something to keep cycling it. I mean, both its effect to summon and dodge targeted negation or targeted interaction, as well as resetting from the graveyard. The number of times where I accidentally drew one of the traps and then I pitched it for Diabell, and then during my combo I just emergency banished to put the trap back on my field. It's a little bit wild. So I think that would be a pretty fair hit to Rescue Ace, much as I wouldn't want to see that deck hit. But when you look at the future support in Phantom Nightmare, where we get Promethean Princess and the Snake Eye Populace, it does have to have something addressed.
Yeah. They might give it a time of day because of that support, because they're still gonna want that deck to keep going. And I personally think it's not. I mean, I think it has a little bit more time. The problem that Konami has created is, or not the problem necessarily, but banning a Rise Heart created such a vacuum in the format that, or like the opposite of a vacuum, that a lot of decks could just like explode with like, oh, we got our graveyards back, everything's back. A super wide meta right now, and Konami's gonna have a bit of a problem balancing it out, because again, you don't want to hit 6 decks, right? But you don't want to hit too little of like amount of decks, because then like you get Rescue Ace like on top immediately. So I'm really interested to see what they do there. Interested to see if they're gonna let the format balance itself out. We got Bologna in a little over a week ish. Fire King is gonna be legal. It's gonna be very interesting to see what happens there. I was betting on a ban list before. We could have that still. I think for my takes, I think I sold. I think Isolde could definitely be banned. No, okay. Isolde could definitely be banned. My personal favorites, and they might not be very realistic. Beatrice probably should go. I think I absolutely love Beatrice. I think it's an awesome card. It fits so well into Tierlaments, almost too well. And again, I posted it on Twitter, and people were like, "Oh, but it's much easier to go into Lavalval Chain or Curious." But in reality, it's as easy today with the Shiyamas of the world and the Bestials of the world to just go into Malicious of the world. Just go into Beatrice. It's as easy. And we have transaction rollback coming in a little over a month. It's going to be very toxic to leave Isolde in the format, and we're going to suffer from it. The second card I personally want to get one see hit is Triple Tactics Talent. I think a lot of people are saying that Thrust is actually the more powerful card. I think they are wrong. I think it's fine to play within the guardrails of what Thrust creates, and sometimes you're going to get hit with a board breaker that is searchable. But I cannot accept trying to interrupt my opponent and then just losing instantly and them taking a card out of my hand. I think it's such a bad design approach, and they just went with it, and they created a whole archetype of cards around like the opponent doing something. Oh no! How did you even dare activate a monster effect, you fool? I personally hate that card. I think it's completely unfair and unbalanced, and hopefully, maybe hit or limited at least.
Yeah, Talents is a fun card, right?
Yeah, when you use it, yeah.
When you use it in Branded Chimera, it's fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's the only time that deck is good.
Hey, yo.
It is a card that can be really frustrating. I know, like, from my experience with Rescue Ace, like, where I'm using Impulse, and I'm just like, I'm not interrupting my opponent. I'm just trying to get the engine online, and then they talents me, and I'm just like, like,
A card
Yeah.
is extremely busted when it has 3 effects, and the worst of them all is draw 2 cards.
that's true.
That is when you know a card is extremely busted.
You know
When
what I
my
think?
opponent activates talents to draw, I breathe a sigh of relief.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, you
Like,
lose.
it's
You lose on the
like-
spot.
It's like, oh, thank God, you're just drawing 2 cards. Okay, whew. Okay, cool. Go ahead. Yeah, that's fine. That resolves. Like that alarms, please.
You know what's like actually crazy about Talent though? Is when the inverse of that happens, right? When your hand is so broken and they activate Talent and you're like, rip whatever you want, friend. It doesn't matter. And like I was staring at my opponent at I think it was a YCS, and I had like Planet, Shiren, Rhino, Solic, and I was just like, doesn't matter. Pick something. And it was so funny. And it's never good at that point, right? But I thought it was hilarious. But you definitely run into those situations too where you're like, you already know you're winning, even if you get talented, it's fine.
Would you like to address the final 2 cards, Gary?
Agito and Kelbeck are both very broken cards. Of course, they are something that's on the chopping block right now, unfortunately. But I feel like that's going to open the door for at least names to 2, hopefully. Just because I feel like that's fair at that point if we're getting rid of the mill 5s. But you can still just outright lose to your deck getting milled, which is crazy. Like, if you want to play that cool adventure engine and then you see your Fateful in the graveyard, like, still very unfortunate. I've had a lot of people argue that you could ban the shufflers instead of the millers, but I still think that the millers are a larger issue than the shufflers, because at least the shufflers can be like a cool little thing you can do in like Labyrinth, or like something that you can still like mill in tier, right? Just interruption that I think is fine. But overall, those 2 cards definitely will probably end up seeing their way onto the ban section of the ban list.
Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your point of view. I, for one, will very much miss Kelbeck, because Kelbeck is an in-engine hand trap, and I like those cards. I would have liked to have lived in a world where we just banned Agito, and we just banned Keldo, and then we leave Kelbeck and Mudora alone, for example. That would have been interesting to see.
As the person on this podcast with the least amount of Tierlament experience, so I guess the more outsider perspective, I just would like for the deck to stop being this absolute Frankenstein horseshit that it is, of just like a random assortment of cards. Frankly, like this random assortment of cards that doesn't, it's just like, oh, this card is good in the graveyard. There isn't really an identity to the deck, I feel, besides this card goes to the graveyard, this card good in graveyard. If this card good in hand as well, great. Like it doesn't have.
We're not cavemen.
Yeah, a little bit.
Good in cave, we put in deck.
But I mean, that's kind of like what the deck is. It's a bunch of one-ofs. It's a bunch of cards that it's like, it just doesn't feel like it really has an identity besides this like 15 years of gambling, basically, from Malicious to now. Like from Malicious to Shiyama, it's basically just like Gambler's Paradise, and I don't think it really has. I think it has an identity crisis because of it.
I don't know. The amount of times I scream "Mill 5, baby" across the room is pretty good. You know, it's a great time.
I hadn't considered that.
You know, Eva, I don't. I mean, I disagree with you saying that it has a lack of identity and all that. I mean, to a certain extent, sure. But I will say, and I think you're kind of getting to that point of view, which is why I'm not saying I like disagree with you entirely. Tierlament is the most toxic deck in the TCG.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I don't know about all that. Flandreese.
No, it's definitely
Flandreese is a deck.
sacky. It's definitely sacky, and it could be unfair, and it's annoying that you know your opponent doesn't have enough tools in their deck, but if they hit the right ones, it goes off like crazy. But they could just as well don't hit anything. This is why it became a Frankenstein, because the core of the deck is so incredibly good, like probably arguably the best deck ever in history. And the core is so strong that even with 7 cards being limited, it still holds on with the common ground of like, I will mill, and I'm gonna pick up some cards that are also good in the graveyard. This is why it probably feels like I had a lot of people like quit on me when like my mill 3 from Kashtir is like a Guido Kelbeck. And that will happen once in like 10, 15 games. That will happen. It will ruin somebody's day.
Talking about going to events, playing these decks, interacting with a lot of them as well, we do have some questions from Twitter for all of us too. And that's going to be the first one here being, what advice do you have for players who play well in practice but struggle at performing well in bigger events? This is one thing that I definitely talk about a lot in Metafy sessions too. So I'm just going to give you back the answer that I typically give. And this would be that a lot of people tend to focus on rounds 1 to 4 and rounds 5 to 9. What's really important about this is that if you go to an event and you're really worried about playing against Magical Musketeers, okay, you're terrified you're going to play against that deck, and then you build your entire side deck to beat Magical Musketeers. You probably won't see that deck at the event, and definitely not in rounds 5 to 9. It's just not going to happen. So a lot of people hyperfixate on certain decks, and they absolutely cannot get it out of their mind that they like will not see that deck at the event. And there's always the chance, right? Like wherever you go, you could see that deck, but the odds you're going to see it are super low. So I would say take a lot of the stress you have on your shoulders off and just focus on playing the game round by round. And the other thing is focus on rounds 5 to 9 for your rescues, your Pearlies, your Unchains. That's what your deck should be built for. And then potentially one of the most popular decks out there, if it's like a really bad matchup for you, just make sure you have extra side hate for it.
I concur with that advice. Very well said. I think another aspect of it is like, if you feel like you are very good in practice, there's 2 types of places where we get practice. So we get practice on like Dueling Book or locals, right? If we compare something to a big event. And if you find that you're doing really good at Dueling Book and you're not doing so well when you go to a regional or a YCS, you might be relying on some of the crutches that Dueling Book provides without even realizing it, and you might not be getting enough practice of IRL play. So that would be something that you could start doing. Conversely, if you find that like you're always winning locals and then you go to a regional and you like win the first few rounds and then you lose, you have to start realizing the fact that the caliber of player that you're playing at your locals is always going to be lower than like the caliber of player that you find at a regional and a YCS. And once you start getting to, as you said, Gary, rounds 5 through 9 is when you're going to encounter the people who are at a similar or above skill level than you, and who have prepared just as much, if not more, for this event than you have. You're at that point, your inexperience will show, and you might say, well, I'm not inexperienced, I practice a lot. Yes, but you were practicing against people that were playing at a round 1 through 4 level, not against people that were playing at a round 5 through 9 level.
Yeah. I think I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't see myself as a person who can really give this kind of advice. I can only give like it from my experience. It's not that I have like YCS titles under my belt, but I feel like this, I'm trying to like break down the question and seeing 2 things. First of all, I agree with everything that was said before me. I think it was spot on. But also I think it could be like, if you are performing well in practice, it means that you are good in a safe, predictable environment that you know really well. I've heard of players who said that you should be in the habit of like, I don't know if it's like actually allowed in like a big event, but they listen to music while playing so that when they go to an event, they listen to the same type of music to get them in the same rhythm and flow. And like, it's sort of like muscle memory for the brain. I'm not really sure that is something that you can actually do in an event, but regardless, I feel like it's more of a mental perspective in this case. If you're good in practice and when you go to big events, there's so many things that just don't happen in practice. You meet a lot of people, you're obviously really excited, you need to wake up and drive and go and get to a venue, and of course play with your physical cards, which is completely different. I think if that's the case, then it's more about like really taking it one game at a time, like Gary said. I think this is how I approach big events. I prepare my deck really well for the better decks and my worst matchups, but still when I'm at the event, I take it one game at a time. I try to win one game at a time, not think about, oh, I'm round 2 and I lost one game, so my tiebreakers are going to be shit later on. Just try to have fun with that, because the mental perspective of big events is rough, and it's super different than practice. So that's also something that you can practice as well. Again, going more to locals, playing more with friends, IRL, paper, muscle memory.
Now, while you can't listen to music at an event, what I have heard people do in reference to that, Galzo, is when they like play on Dueling Book or whatever, they listen to like music, like loud music. And the idea of that is that events are pretty loud. And some people have a hard time concentrating. It's like it's one of like the things that I remember hearing a lot was like, oh, it's really nice when you get to sit at the VIP section because there's no voices around you and you can really focus on your game. So I've heard of people that will like listen to loud music while they're playing on DB. That way, when they're playing at an event, they're used to playing with noise and while other people are talking. Something to consider.
So I guess a few like pieces of advice are just like, one thing is, for me, like when I first started going to events and stuff, I have really bad nerves. So I shake a lot. I have like really bad like tremors and stuff like that. And that was a big problem for me when I was first going to events. So it sounds very simple, but just like remembering to breathe and remembering to stay in the game and not be like kind of drift off into the far recesses of your mind. Yeah, honestly, because like those nerves will get to you and you will lose kind of your focus. And also staying well fed and hydrated, like super important, and not enough people do it. In terms of like the actual game stuff for performing better at big events, with your with like siding stuff, make sure that you walk into a side event. Make sure you walk into a big event with your siding patterns laid out. Make sure that so you're not like scrambling and trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do here? Make sure that you have like the matchups that you're almost certain that you'll see at some point, kind of laid out in your head, so you're not scrambling in the middle of games 2 or 3. And also just recognizing that when you're playing on Dueling Book or even sometimes at locals, you're not held to the same constraints of time that you're going to be at a big event. So I remember like there was a Joshua Schmidt video where he was playing Pearly for an event. And he was like, I didn't realize how often I'd go to time, because he was testing on Dueling Book, and it was just, you take a playback, you're talking with your friends, it's more casual. And you don't recognize that. So make sure that you know how to play under time, especially if you're practicing with friends. Put a timer on for both of y'all to go through the match. It's not a perfect 1-to-1 because Dueling Book can be a bit slower, but just recognize that time will be of the essence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge thing, especially when people started playing tier for the first time. You could tell when they were brand new with the deck because they just did not understand what the clock was. Because that deck took a long time, especially when you're in a mirror and you go to like Chain Link 17 or whatever you're at. And it's just like, this is a crazy matchup to have, especially when you have to be like really on it with the time. Because like, especially if you're in game 2 and it's taking forever, you either have to finish that game out or just go to game 3 because you need to make sure that you have another game to play at least. So it is definitely very important. What happened at your first event? How was it? My first event was the Duelist Alliance Regional, and I could not really afford to play anything super crazy. So I was like, okay, what can I buy that can do like semi well with? So I went to a card shop and I bought Chainburn. This was my decision. I was like, I'm buying Chainburn. And then round 1 gets paired at the regional. And I'm super nervous, right? And I was like, who am I playing against? Like, this is the first round. I've never played this deck before in person. Like, we're just gonna run it. It's cool. The person who sold me the deck was my round 1 opponent. and just didn't play into Lava Golem, and I was so hurt. I was like, "There's no way." I just got blown out like every round. It was so bad. But that was my very first event experience.
My very first event, or my first big event, was YCS Niagara last year. Yeah, last year. And I got to play, and it was my first time playing at a YCS, and I finished 5-3 at the end of day one. So I didn't make it to day two or anything like that. But I had a lot of fun. And what I had the most fun during that event was getting to meet all of these people that I had been like watching on YouTube or things like that, and like checking out their content, and like have known about and heard about for so long. And that to me, like hanging out with friends, meeting people, to me, that's kind of what made me like fall in love with going to events. Like it's like sometimes I'll go to an event, I don't even like the format, and I'll still make an effort to go to the event because it's like obviously playing is important, and I like to win. Everybody does, but having finding the fun in an event outside of just the competitive aspect, I think was very important, and I'm grateful for having had such a fun first YCS, because otherwise, who knows, I might have not gone to the second one. Yeah.
I actually met you and Eva both at Niagara, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Back when I was a nobody.
Yes, and
you're here.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, so Niagara was also my first big event. And I didn't, and of course, like Gary and I met there, but yeah, Rourke, we did not. I didn't meet you until we did the podcast.
No, I don't think I knew who you were at the time either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did the event, and I was playing Labyrinth, and this is like Tactical Masters Labyrinth. I had a sprite list that I worked on with with a competitive player who I hired to coach me and stuff like that, and then I was like, I gotta play a lab. And she was so disappointed in me, but you know what? We ran it. And I didn't do super well and went like 3-3 drop. But after the event, if you've ever been to Niagara Convention Center, it's a 5-minute walk from Niagara Falls. I had never been to Niagara Falls before. I had never even really thought about going there. And after the event, we were just like, the falls are right there. And you walk over to the falls, and I'm out there looking at the falls with my partner, and I'm just like, why did I come here to play Yu-Gi-Oh first? Like you see this beautiful display before you, and you think, why did I come to play Yu-Gi-Oh when this beautiful piece of nature is here? And then you recognize, actually, it was the Yu-Gi-Oh that even got me here. Because before Yu-Gi-Oh, I wasn't really terribly social. I wasn't really going out and seeing people, spending time with a lot of people. I was pretty quiet. But after like playing and wanting to go to these events, it's brought me to all these places that I didn't think I would be going to for any real reason. But now when I hear there's a Yu-Gi-Oh event somewhere, I'm like, all right, we're going to Niagara, we're going to Richmond, we're going to Raleigh, So I really love that about events.
We're going to Australia.
We're going to Australia.
I think my first big event was a regional. I was a COVID baby, so I started playing right after, during COVID, and then like first regional after we were allowed to play. I'm pretty sure I played Sky Striker. Thank you, Gary.
Welcome.
It was definitely thank you. It was definitely Striker. I was a big fan, and I probably got kind of smoked. I was okay with the deck, I think. But it's a first time playing in a big event. It's kind of jarring that it takes a while, and if the place is a little bit disorganized, then it takes a little bit more time. And it's just like a whole day. And I wasn't really familiar with like anybody in the community in particular. I was like a 31-year-old in like a midlife crisis, coming back to Yu-Gi-Oh after like I haven't played since 2004 probably. And the first couple events are a little bit rough if you're not surrounded by a lot of friends that if you're trying to get like back into it. I was personally a lot older than a lot of the people, so it took a little bit of time, but eventually, like, that's the great thing about this game. And a lot of people ask me about this, about like, the social aspect of the game. It doesn't matter how old you are or how old the people who you play with are. You make great connections in this game, and I think this is what led me to, like, you get crushed in the event, but similar to what Eva said, like, look at where it got me. How could I not love this experience, even though I didn't really do well competitively? And then you go to the next one. The next one, you see more people, you get familiarized with like the community, and it's really nice. It's really, really fun and nice. So it's if you're listening to this and you haven't been to your first big event, just know that it gets better as you go. Even if the first one is not a competitive success, it will get better competitively, and just the experience itself.
Listen, if getting puppet locked 4 times at one event didn't make me quit Yu-Gi-Oh, like, we're still here, all right? Like, it's gonna be all right. We're gonna play some Yu-Gi-Oh. We might end up being the one playing some toxic cards. Like, I have a locals that I'm skipping tonight, but there's Fluanderies everywhere. It's just like shifter dot deck dot deck dot deck. Like, it's literally every deck you sit down against is just shifter. So I'm pulling up with Altergeist, Metaverse, Secret Village, and Skill Drain, and I'm gonna be like, let's go. Like, you made me this monster. This is what we're doing. So that is the plan. But like, that's also very fun about Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like, you can do things like that, and people would never expect it to. For even myself, right? Like, the last time I played a control deck, because Striker is more like mid-range, right? The last time I played like a true control deck was Guru. So like, it's been a really long time. So like, me walking in somewhere with Altergeist, everyone's like, what is happening? Like, it is really fun though. Just to be able to switch it up, even for a little while.
Expulsion to 1.
We are always about the Geist gaming.
We are looking for another person for the podcast. There's only 3 of us. We're all very, very cool individuals. If anyone would like to join in, let us know down below, please.
Non-branded players, please. Non-branded players.
Talking about the next point here, which is fantastic. We just led right into this one. What are your personal most hated decks? And more importantly, why? Well, so this might actually be a surprise. Because if I were to ask all 3 of you, what would you say is my most hated deck?
Flunderies.
It would have to be Flu, right? It'd have to be Flu, right?
So, would you believe that there is a card in a deck that I hate more than Fluanderies and Shifter?
What?
So I've talked about this before in a video, but there was a singular card and a singular deck that almost made me quit Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I was getting so aggravated every time the card didn't get banned.
Oh.
There's a very fun dragon that is currently on the ban list.
Oh.
So you would sit down against Virtual World, right? And Valor and Imperm were useless. Those cards sucked. Like, they literally did nothing. Like, less than nothing. And even if you open Imperm and your opponent goes activate Calamity and you go Imperm, they chain Chuche and pop their own Calamity. And then VW players got even more smart and they started making double Calamity, like, through Nib. And I was like, this just is not fun anymore. Like, I just was not enjoying my time. But it finally got banned. It took forever for that card to get banned. But VFD will always be my most hated card in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! More than Shifter, which seems crazy. But, like, that card was so egregiously unfair to play against. But that is mine.
Personal most hated decks, I don't really have, like, an individual deck that I absolutely loathe. There's things that I enjoy about each deck. Honestly, it's the cards around Fluanderies that I hate. Like, I love the art, and I actually enjoy the resource loop of Flu quite a bit. It's just like the Shifter and the Featherstorm that I really don't like. So, I don't really have one off the top of my head that just, like, really sticks out to me as, man, I absolutely hate the deck. Maybe Mathmech, I don't really like that deck very much, but it's not an all-consuming hate.
Eva's inability or refusal to be toxic is like her biggest red flag. Like, just tell us what deck you hate. You don't have to like everything, okay? You are allowed to hate. It's okay.
I know. I had a thing. I know I had a thing on Twitter like a day ago where I like talked shit about somebody's deck list because there were a bunch of random one-ups, and like an hour later, I was like, you know, that wasn't right of me. I should have been nicer about this person's deck list.
No, lean into it.
I
Next time.
know.
Yes, embrace it.
No.
You'll find a lot of new friends on Twitter.
Oh, brother. I hate Salamangreat.
Whoa.
I hate that deck. I hate that deck so much. I can't stand it. That deck is unbeatable.
She lost to it once.
What?
Against me, that deck might as well be tier 0. You put like 20 Rorks in a room, and Salamangreat is winning all games.
Have you ever tried playing a card in your deck that's a level 11?
Yes, I did. And so this is what happened. The first time that I played against Salamangreat, I heard that, you know, because I you know, you talk on like Discord and you see, and people always say, oh, Salamangreat, Nib token pass, Nib token pass. I'm like, cool. Okay, I have Nibiru in my deck. I am ready for this. Okay, game 1, I didn't draw Nibiru. Okay, fair enough. Okay, game 3, I did draw Nibiru. But there's this card called Nightmare Corruptor Ibli. Now, I had never seen this card before. And my opponent gave it to me. And I was like, okay. And I was like, can I read it? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so I read it. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I can only special summon Cybers. I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking like it's from the extra deck, you know, because I don't really like reading cards and my reading comprehension for Yu-Gi-Oh cards is not very good. So I understood it as, oh, from the extra deck. And I was like, that's fine. That's fine. I should be fine here. I can only summon Link monsters, right? Or like, yeah, that's it, Link monsters. So I was like, that's okay. I can normal summon Ray, and then I can link it off for like Zeke or something. This is fine. So I tried to Nibiru my opponent. And my opponent, I kid you not, they do this. They actually wagged a finger at me. And I'm like, why? What? And they're like, you can only summon Link monsters. I'm like, oh, that's stupid. So, okay, so I couldn't nib them. Okay. And then when they passed it back to me, I'm like, okay, so standby main, and they're like, standby phase, and they flip Rivalry of Warlords. And I was like, wait, I don't have any Cybers. And he's like, yeah. Like, but that means I can't play. Yeah. So I lose. Yeah. I hate Salamangreat. I hate that deck. It's just unbeatable. I think I literally needed like full powered Ishizu tier to ever beat that deck. I never beat that deck without the Ishizu.
Have you ever played a game against Salamangreat except for that one game?
Yeah, I have. Okay, no, obviously since then I like now understand the deck more and all that. But it was just a very negative first impression that I had of the deck, okay, you know? So I don't like Salamangreat, okay? I don't like salad. I love salad the food. I don't like salad the deck, okay?
Love Salamangreat. Fire decks are worth it.
I don't like long combos, you know? I've never played combo. Probably like now that I play a little bit more tier, then it takes me a bit of time to finish my turn. But you know, I've always been a more of a branded fusion Ash pass, man. That's fine. 10-second turn. It's all good. You play. So I think Drytron and Rika have always been like the bane of my existence. I'm like, dude, I got Chimera Fusion, Mirror Swords Knight, Burfamat, Fuse, Rip one, pass, dude. It's all good. That's a 2-minute turn. They're playing like Drytron and Rika is like a 15-minute, literal 37-minute turn. Those are the decks I can't stand. It doesn't matter which deck it is. The only honorable mention is the whole 16 playing the draw phase labyrinth combo. That is the thing that I hate. I just uploaded a short. Go check it out afterwards. You'll see how many things happened in the draw phase. And then when I normal summoned, when it was finally over, after Eradicator, after Lady, after Lovely, after everything, I normal summoned, change skill drain, GG, bud.
I saw that short. That was beautiful.
That
I loved every second of it. I wish I was on the other side of that table.
Back to you, Gary.
So after everything that was just said as far as decks that we hate and the decks that, we think are going to be up on the chopping block for the ban list, do we think that we're in a healthier state of game, or do we need a lot of hits still on the ban list?
I don't think we need a lot of hits. I don't think we need like a massacre. We don't need like a what are those lists from the past? Like a Dragon Ruler list, or like a Nishizu Tierlament level list, or like a Toss like 2020 level list. I don't think we need something like that. But I think we need a little bit more than just a small ban list. Like we just had a small ban list, right? Like we just had a very tiny ban list, and I think that was probably fine for what they were going for at the moment. But I think we need a nice medium ban list. I want to see like every deck that is like tier 1 in the format, I think has at least one card where you could point to it and go like, this card could get limited or this card could get banned. And I would like to see all of that happen as we usher in the new year of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Like every January list, though, right? Like every January list is just insane. It's just like 100 hits. So we'll see.
I think they should hit decks. Again, I also agreed that there doesn't need to be a huge ban list in terms of like there's no like the Arise hard to ban to free us all from like enslavement, right? It's only like certain decks that have like a little bit of a unfun or unfair part to them. But it will be interesting if they take like an approach of non-engine, right? Prosperity to 1. Okay? Fucks 3 decks in a row, right? That immediately does that. And a lot of those hits could be even like something like Beatrice that I said before. It's not a part of any deck's engine per se, but it's something that is definitely used in a deck. I don't think like maybe I can think of Sleepy Memory that is a very annoying card that is an engine card. But besides that, I don't think any deck is doing something extremely unfair. The unfair parts come when the non-engine is in play, because when you full combo in a deck like Rescue Ace, I don't think it feels too bad to be on the other side of it. It's like, okay, maybe I made an SP Turbulence set 4. It's fine. Maybe you have targeting protection. Maybe you have like Pearly Street. I don't know. That could be a fair matchup. It becomes unfair when they prosp into the whatever anti-spell, right? That's when it becomes annoying. And I think that could be an interesting approach. Because again, there's no like the public enemy number 1 right now, I feel like.
Yeah. I'll honestly say that, and this might be just, I don't know, like, that I feel I've gotten better at the game, or I've been able to afford more like meta cards, things like that. But this might be the format I've enjoyed the most of the past of the 2.5 years I've been playing competitively. Like it's a format that I've really enjoyed, because a lot of the decks are not doing things that are necessarily going to absolutely make you implode through their combo. So when I think about like the most unfair combos in the game, like yes, the Infernoble combo is extremely powerful, and can sometimes play through a lot of hand traps, but I don't necessarily mind that is like the big bad combo deck of the format. When you think about a deck like the Diabell Star and Mikanko deck, they have to draw, Ken or Gen to really get into their Acid Golem lock. Otherwise, their board it's beatable. Like, if you have the right cards, it is beatable with, a pure engine. And when it comes to, like, a lot of the other decks, like Unchained and Rescue Ace, and even Tierlaments to some extent, they're, it is not like an immediate lose scenario. Centurion even too. You still get to play in the main phase, and if you find a way to make the Calamity miss timing, or you interact with one of their monsters so they can't make the synchro, then you're able to play the game. So I think that there's a lot to praise about this format. The lingering floodgates that have been a problem for as long as I play this game, and even longer, are going to continue to persist unless they're addressed. But I've honestly had a lot of fun with this format, and I could see myself wanting to stay here for a bit.
And they're not going to ban SP. Don't you worry. You guys can buy 1 copy of SP. It's going to stay limited probably forever. A lot of people are saying like maybe there is a case to ban SP. Maybe it's like too like the center of the format. And I think it's also good that there's like a pillar where a lot of decks can use it. A lot of decks can't use it as well, but most decks can definitely use it. Just to call out that Konami has released this card, knowingly or unknowingly, to just increase the overall, like take Yu-Gi-Oh to the next level. And once we've hit this level, they don't want us to go back. Like this is the new reality of Yu-Gi-Oh. This card exists. Same thing with like Zeus, right? Zeus is like a different reality where you can turn an Xyz into a board wipe. It's fine. I mean, it's limited in the OCG, granted, right? But it's like this is the new reality you all have to live under. It's fine. Adapt. It could definitely go to 1 because I think like might be too toxic at 2, but it's safe. Buy your SPs.
And specifically, SP, like in other moments where you've had a card that just kind of like ups the ceiling of the format, or this is a new power level, where you think about like Verte Anaconda when Dragoon is finally released, or Halka Fibrax, Auroradon, bunch of the stuff from Dual Overload. Those are almost entirely like combo enablers, right? And in a lot of cases, SP is not that. It is, in a lot of cases, more of a board breaker. Because of it's such an oppressive card. In a good way, I suppose, going second. Because, for example, when I was at YCS Richmond, the card that I popped with the Rescue Ace Extinguished the most was a Linkaribo of the entire event, because I played a number of Rescue Ace mirrors, and I said, I have to get rid of this Linkaribo right now, because if they go into SP, there's going to be a lot more trouble for me headed my way. And with cards like that, and also Typhon, the extra deck is further becoming more of this board breaking tool that I really love. And I think it's a good way for the game to be going, to support these cards that are generic, but make going second even better in this game. Still not to the extent where we're at parity, where it's 50-50 whether you win the die roll or not, but makes it easier.
Yeah, I do have to agree. There is a couple problematic cards right now, but I don't think that the format is overall like one of the worst ones we've ever had or anything like that. I think that it's definitely playable. Even going to events right now, I still feel pretty confident that I'll do well. So it's not like, well, if we play against this scenario, it's going to be unfortunate. But I mean, like, even Centurion, I was talking about that on Twitter. I called that deck bad so many times. I just think that's so funny though, because like I just did a whole video about this too, about like what's good, what's bad, and like how to like know if a deck's good or bad. And it really is just a matter of seeing what the deck can do and really seeing the innovation a deck can have. But at the same time, I feel like right now the better decks are the better decks and the worst decks are the worst decks. There's not really anything that's like really crazy out of left field. Like we did just get like Bestial Horus, Runic Pile, which is kind of cool. It's an interesting deck. But I know next format in Phantom Nightmare, we're going to be seeing a lot of the Resonator cards and different builds with those too, even though we are now. Those cards are very cool though, but it's definitely cool to see different innovation coming into the format. But I appreciate each and every one of you joining us here as always. It's been another great episode. You know, we've been long overdue, but we will be putting up more and more episodes. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us on. This is always a pleasure. I love getting together with the three of you and talking Yu-Gi-Oh! For the audience, I hope that you all enjoyed our discussion. And yeah, check me out at twitch.tv/Roarkallos.
Thank you, audience, and thank you, Gigi, for hosting us. You can also find me on Twitter as @Evilise.
So don't forget to add your comments below if you agree with our takes or not. Also, you can find me at youtube.com/Galzo or twitter.com/GalzoTCG. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Later, everyone. Thank you.